What's up, everybody? Sorry for the delay. I've been meaning to get back on here and update you guys on my previous video where I had the orientee who ended up not coming back to work based on her experience that she was having with her preceptor and some of the other staffers on night shift. Now, since then, the management, the education department is aware of what took place. They actually reached out to her and tried rectifying the situation. They even offered her to come back and try again, this time on day shift, but she declined because what she's afraid of, she said, okay, I can be on orientation and yes, I can train on day shift, but night shift is ultimately where I'm going to be working. And what am I supposed to do on a night shift when you have people like that who won't support me? And the fact that they got reported and found out because of her, she was just like, this is not going to be a good situation for me. So even though the manager encouraged and tried to get her to come back, she declined. Just recently on TikTok, one of the nurses that I follow, her name on TikTok is Nikki Doohickey. She also has a YouTube channel. It's called As Told by Nicole. She recently made a post addressing these kind of issues where she is saying that, yes, it might be tough coming into a new environment where you're taking care of the sickest patients in the hospital. But in nursing, you have to have a bad backbone and you have to be able to stand up for yourself. Nikki's video basically talked about not letting anybody run her from getting her money and run her from her job. And I have to say that I do agree with that stance. However, I do understand not everyone is built like that. I remember my first ICU experience. Let me tell y'all how they tried me. They tried me, but it only took one time for them to realize that me, Kendra, I'm not the one. My first experience in the ICU was the first time I ever had a code. In my entire career, like before going to the ICU, I had been a nurse for, I want to say 5 years, and I've never had a code. I've seen codes happen. I've participated in codes. I've done a few chest compressions. I've filled out the code sheet, but my patient coding never happened. Just so happened that I was off of orientation. I had one patient, and of course, I had an empty room. And I remember getting like the heads up from the charge nurse saying that we had a rapid response upstairs and that patient's going to be coming to you. We think he cardiac arrested or he had an MI. He may need to go to the cath lab, but he's really sick. And I was like, oh my goodness. So he was a rapid response, came downstairs to the ICU. We get him settled in the room. Everyone leaves me in the room and I'm there tending to the patient, getting his temperature, his blood pressure, just basically trying to settle him, going back and forth from the computer, checking new orders that were being placed by the resident because he is a new patient to critical care. So I'm doing all these things in the room. And then I look to the monitor and the heart rate drops from like 80s to 60s to 50s. And the heart rate is like slowly dropping to like 40s and 30s. So of course, this is my first time having a patient coded. So I ran to the door and I called out for help and a bunch of people came into the room. Long story short, the patient coded, lost a pulse. We had to resuscitate him and thankfully we successfully resuscitated him, shipped him off to the cath lab, so on and so forth. But that whole code was an entire mess. And while the code is going on, I can see some nurses standing at the door. You know when a code is happening? And rather than jumping in and help, you have some people that just want to stand, take in the information so they can go back and critique after, or they can go back and gossip about how terrible the code was being ran and nitpick the code apart. So I peeped that, right? So I was like, okay, so it's like 3 nurses, they're standing at the doorway. One of them is recording. But when I looked, she's recording on a piece of tissue paper, the code. And I'm just like, okay. So I have like blood in my hand. I have a form that I need to fill out because the tube station wasn't working, or like we needed to use like downtime forms or something. And remember now, I'm off orientation, not even a full week, and I get this patient. So it's all this madness going on. Anyway, like I said, the patient went to the cath lab. They were able to stabilize him. While he was in the cath lab, I remember leaving the room and walking up the nurse's station to do something. And I was walking back past the nurse's station. One of those catty nurses that was standing at the doorway ready to critique, she says out loud in the open with other people around, this particular hospital, the residents didn't sit in a separate room. They sat at the nurses station. They just sat on one end. The intensivist sat on another end. And there were just some extra open computer spaces in case management or one of us wanted to use the computers to document. So I remembered her saying, let me talk to you for a minute. Let me talk to you for a second. So I'm thinking, okay, what's going on? She was like, I don't know if anyone ever taught you this, if you ever learned this where you came from, but when your patient is coding, you are never to leave the room. You should never leave the room. You should stay with the patient. So I looked at her. I was like, girl, okay. So this is what happened. The patient, when everyone came into the room and we were actively coding the patient, right before we had to code him, I had drew labs. So I had like 6 tubes in my hand. And remember I told you like it was downtime or it was something to do with a form being filled out, right? So I had the form and I had the labs in my hand. I had started filling the form out. But there wasn't anyone for me to hand the stuff to and say, take it over. And I didn't know a lot of the staff really well because I was on orientation. Then I got off of orientation. And so I'm just like still getting acclimated. So I ran to the tube station. I finished the form, put the label, put the blood in the bag or whatever, and I sent it on and I came back. However, that patient was new to me. So it's not like I had this patient all day and I can give a good comprehensive history on what took place. When we first started coding him, I did let the resident know, like, okay, his heart rate was in the 80s. It's dropped to the 60s, 40s, 30s. I called y'all, and here we go. They knew the patient because they just rapid responsed him from upstairs. So this is like a continuation. It's not like it's brand new. So when she said that to me at the nurse's station, like, I don't know who told you, but you're never supposed to leave your patient alone during the code. I was like, okay. First of all, I was pissed that they stood at the door and wasn't coming into the room to actively help. It was majority the residents, myself, a tech, and maybe 2 other nurses trying to resuscitate this patient. 3 or 4 of them was just standing at the doorway looking in. And I know I'm passionate about this because it's so fresh. Like it's so fresh. I remember it like it was yesterday. And immediately I can feel the heat rising coming up my neck. Remember, my adrenaline is already on 10 because, my patient just coded for the first time in my nursing career. So when she said that to me, I was like, what? She was like, yeah, you left the room when your patient was coding. You're not supposed to do that. I looked at her. I said, and what were you doing when my patient was coded? I said, where were you? I said, why didn't you come in the room and take the labs and take the paperwork from me and offer to send it to the lab? I said, you stood there at the door. You weren't doing nothing. And I was like, now that I'm walking past, you want to wait at the nurse's station instead of coming to me one-on-one. You want to wait while you're sitting there around everybody to try to embarrass me and tell me that, oh, I should never leave the room when my patient is coding. I said, you think that's helpful? Is that helpful? How is that helpful to me right now? Where were you when I needed you, girl? At this point, you can hear a pin drop. The residents, they were like, the attending physician was like, because I'm like, it seems to me that these glasses, I wear glasses when I'm at work. It seems to me that my glasses and the quietness might be fooling y'all because I am not the one, ma'am. I'm not the one. Nursing career, I have always been hyper alert about nurses who want to bully and target other nurses. And I think maybe just from me working as a tech and working in that environment and observing how nurses treat each other, when I finally became a nurse, I already knew. Like, all right, nobody, like they say nurses eat your young, I am not up for anybody's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Like, you are not about to play me. So she was shocked. She was like, well, I was just trying to help you. I said, no, helping me would be you coming in the room. Helping me would be you taking the labs from me, finishing up the paperwork because you know this institution better than I do. I'm new. I've only been here like about 2 months. And here you are. Instead of being helpful, you're trying to critique me. And I said, I don't appreciate that. I said, also, you could have came to me one-on-one if you were really trying to be helpful. Everybody was still quiet looking. I don't think they was expecting me to turn up the way that I did. But I already told you, the heat was creeping up my back and my adrenaline was on 100. The drama continues. So after that was said and done, everybody went back to minding their business. It was like an awkward silence. I think she got up and walked away. Her and her little congregation congregated. And I know they was talking smack about me, but like I said, I always tell people, I said, I'm a G. I will turn up real quick, especially if I know I'm not in the wrong. I don't care if it's work. Like, you're not going to do that to me. Like, I've seen nurses just destroy the self-esteem of other nurses, and I've always vowed never to be that nurse. Like, it's not happening with me. So she ventured over. Her little friends was keying it up, chatting it up, and I'm just like, all right, whatever. So here's the next part. One of the other nurses, part of the crew, comes over to me with, I'm looking to see if I have a sheet of paper. Let me see. Okay, hold on. This is a sheet of paper. One of them comes over to me with the tissue paper that they recorded the code on and dropped it on the station, on the little alcove desk thingy that I was sitting at. Casually dropped it and was like, you're going to have to transcribe that on the code sheet that was in the cart. What? I am going to have to transcribe your scribble scrabble chicken scratch onto the code sheet? Oh, y'all got me all the way messed up. Say this. I know all about professionalism, and as a black woman and even as a black nurse in the workplace, we are always told about, you got to act professional. Don't act this kind of way because you don't want those white people to think. I do not subscribe to any of that. I am authentically me. What you see is what you're going to get. If you come at me crazy, you're going to get it back. Okay, if you come at me sideways and if you're unprofessional in your manner, because guess what? Trying to correct me at the nurse's station openly, that's unprofessional. And then coming with a sheet of tissue that you recorded the code on and dropping it on my station and telling me that I need to transcribe it, that's unprofessional as well. So guess what? We all unprofessional in here. All of us, we gonna be unprofessional. So I looked at her, I said, I'm not transcribing anything. I said, you recorded it. I said, in the crash cart, don't you guys have a sheet? Oh, well, when the code happened, when the crash cart was open, we didn't see the sheet, so we just decided to write it down. You know, we were just documenting. I just decided to jot everything down everyone was saying was taking place on the paper. We didn't have time to fill the sheet out. I said, well, somebody gonna have to find time. Someone's going to have to find time because the code sheet requires a signature from the nurse that transcribed the document, the nurse pushing the medications, the physician overseeing the code. Everyone has to sign it. And guess what? I was not none of those people. So I'm not transcribing shit, for lack of a better word. I'm not transcribing anything. So what happened was, I guess she went ahead and I think she went to the educator or to the manager and they had a little conversation because about 30-40 minutes later, the educator comes trickling over to me and was like, oh, what happened? And I was like, what do you mean what happened? My patient coded and your staff acted a whole entire fool. She was like, really? Like, oh, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 blah. So she was like, where is the paperwork for the code? I said, it's sitting right here on a tissue paper that one of your experienced nurses who's been here for 10 plus years documented that code on. And she was like, oh yeah, we need to transfer it over to the actual code sheet. I said, I'm not transferring it. I said, she's going to have to write it up. And if she doesn't want to, I guess you're going to have to write it up. I said, because this is unprofessional. I said, my patient just coded. I have a whole bunch of documentation to do, not only on the patient coding and the fact that he's a new patient to the unit, but also my other patient as well. Like, you forget I have another patient? Also, my patient that coded, it's not like he coded and passed. He is alive and he's coming back to the room to get further care, meaning I'm going to be extra busy. I do not have time, ma'am, to transcribe any chicken scratch that was written down on a piece of paper. I said, your nurses should have known the proper way to document a code, which is on the code sheet found in the top drawer. As soon as you pull it open, it's right there. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to be able to do it. Educator took responsibility for it. She said, I'm very sorry this happened to you. I will go ahead and transcribe it and I'll get her to sign it and I'll get the physician to sign it and whoever the medication nurse was, I'll get them to sign it as well. They apologize. You know, this is not the way we want for your experience to be here on this unit. You know, you're a really good nurse. We want to retain you. We want to keep you. We want for you to stay within the organization. I am sure you do. And guess what? I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. I came to this ICU for a reason, okay? I too have goals myself, and I'm not going to let anybody deter me from my goals. So that is the reason why when, like I said, my nurse friend on TikTok made that statement, Nikki's statement was basically, B, stand up. And you guys already know what the B means. She meant stand up. Do not let anybody boss you around. Use your mouth. Use your brain that God gave you. You know when you're not being treated well. And you also have to know your rights as a nurse. Because guess what? You too have rights. Even as a new nurse in the institution, you have rights. Don't let these nurses, these miserable nurses, bully you out of your job and bully you away from your goals, making it longer to achieve your goals. In my personal opinion, I think, especially in critical care, because this didn't really happen to me too much on med-surg units or step-down units, but I noticed in critical care, ICU specifically, the bullying and the lateral violence, the plain old nurse violence is the worst. And you really have to know how to stand up for yourself, because if I didn't know how to stand up for myself in that moment when my patient coded, I probably would have left too and just went somewhere else. But I didn't. And that is what I want for the takeaway to be from this video. So now, to end things, the manager did say that he's happy and he's happy to be aware of these issues. There's now a magnifying glass placed on the issues. He was really surprised that this was even happening on night shift, because typically night shifters are cool. Like, night shift don't really have no drama. That's the reason why a lot of nurses like working night shift, because there is no drama on night shift. But on this particular unit, I don't know what they're drinking before they go to work, honey, but it is a lot of drama. Like on day shift, we don't even have drama like that. But like he said, he is working to eliminate and to get rid of that. He's aware of the preceptors that are problematic. And for right now, they will not be precepting anybody that's new to the unit, because we can't afford, especially in this time, to be losing nurses left and right. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for all your comments. I will see you all in the next video.